I stood in my rehearsal dress, smoothing the simple white fabric as my future mother-in-law walked through the garden setup. Paul and I had spent weeks planning this outdoor wedding, choosing every detail with care. The string lights hung between oak trees, wildflowers scattered across wooden tables, and hand-painted signs welcomed guests to our celebration. It was everything we wanted: intimate, heartfelt, and completely us. "This looks like a backyard barbecue, not a wedding," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the peaceful afternoon. She ran her perfectly manicured finger along one of the wooden chairs we'd borrowed from the community center. "Paul, darling, are you sure about this?" His sister, Cassandra, laughed from behind her phone. "Don't worry, Mom. Maybe the thrift store theme will distract people from the plastic chairs." She snapped a photo, probably for her Instagram story. The small group of family members chuckled. I felt my smile crack at the edges, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched my bouquet of daisies. Paul squeezed my hand, but said nothing to defend our choices. The silence hurt more than the insults. The whispers started during dinner that evening. Victoria didn't bother keeping her voice down as she spoke to Paul's aunt. "I told my son he deserves better than this budget nonsense," she said, loud enough for half the table to hear. "But what can you do when love makes you blind?" I sat 3 seats away, pushing food around my plate. My cheeks burned hot, and I could feel every eye in the room flickering between Victoria and me. Paul reached for his wine glass, avoiding my gaze completely. His silence felt like betrayal, a knife twisting deeper with each passing second. Cassandra added fuel to the fire. "At least the food won't be expensive. Grace probably got a bulk deal somewhere." More laughter erupted around the table. I excused myself quietly, my vision blurring with unshed tears. In the bathroom, I gripped the sink and stared at my reflection. This was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. Instead, I felt small and worthless, judged for not having money I'd never pretended to possess. I'd worked 3 jobs to afford even this simple celebration. That night, I collapsed on my kitchen floor and sobbed. The cold tiles pressed against my knees as I let everything pour out: the humiliation, the hurt, the crushing weight of never being good enough. I'd been saving for 2 years, working as a waitress, a bookstore clerk, and a weekend dog walker just to make this wedding happen. I didn't want flashy or extravagant. I wanted meaningful. I wanted the people we loved gathered under the stars, celebrating something real. But Victoria had poisoned that dream, making me feel cheap and desperate instead of proud and excited. Paul called twice. I didn't answer. What could he possibly say? He'd stood there silently while his family tore me apart. He'd chosen their approval over my dignity, and that realization shattered something inside me. I pulled my wedding binder toward me, looking at the sketches and plans we'd made together. Tears dropped onto the pages, smearing the ink. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was fooling myself thinking I belonged in their world. I remembered our engagement dinner 6 months earlier, when Victoria had first shown her true colors. Paul had just proposed on the beach, and I was floating on happiness. We'd gathered his family at their favorite restaurant to share the news. "You're sure she's not marrying you for money?" Victoria had asked, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. She'd smiled sweetly, as if the question was perfectly innocent. "I mean, we barely know anything about her background." Paul had laughed nervously. "Mom, come on. Grace isn't like that." "Of course not," Victoria replied, sipping her champagne. "I'm just being protective. You understand, don't you, Grace?" I nodded, forcing a smile while my heart sank. The truth was, there was never any money to begin with. Paul worked as a high school teacher, and his family's wealth came from his grandparents. Victoria acted like royalty, but Paul lived modestly by choice. That night should have been my first warning. But I'd been too in love to see the red flags waving right in front of me. 2 weeks later, we sat in our apartment discussing the wedding budget. The fancy venue Victoria wanted would cost $15,000, more than I made in 6 months. Paul spread the quotes across our coffee table, his expression troubled. "Let's just do it our way," I suggested, trying to sound confident. Small, simple, honest. That's who we are. We can have the garden ceremony we originally planned. Paul hesitated, picking at the corner of one paper. Mom's not going to like that. She's already told half her book club about the waterfront venue. She doesn't like me anyway, I said quietly. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with truth we both knew but rarely acknowledged. Paul looked up, pain flashing across his face. Grace, that's not. It is true, I interrupted gently. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. This is our wedding, not hers. Can we please just do what makes us happy? He finally nodded, but the worry never left his eyes. I kissed his cheek, hoping we'd made the right choice. Deep down, I knew the battle with Victoria was far from over. A week later, my best friend Maya showed me the text thread. Her face was apologetic as she handed me her phone. I'm sorry, but I think you need to see this. The group chat was titled Paul's Wedding Mess. Victoria and Cassandra had been messaging back and forth for days, mocking every detail of our plans. Dollar store love, Victoria had written. I've never been so embarrassed in my life. Cassandra replied with a crying laughing emoji. At least we can skip the gift. What would we even buy them? More plastic chairs. There were screenshots of our wedding website, with mocking comments about the DIY decorations and potluck-style dinner. They'd shared it with at least a dozen family members. Maya scrolled down, showing me message after message of cruel jokes and thinly veiled insults. I handed the phone back, my hands shaking. Delete those screenshots, I told Maya. But I couldn't delete the pain. It settled deep in my chest, making it hard to breathe. These people were supposed to become my family. Instead, they saw me as entertainment, someone beneath them worth mocking. If you're loving this story of revenge and redemption, please subscribe for more incredible real-life tales. 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. Elena Morrison. No, Elena had remarried. Elena Hartley now. She'd been my mentor when I volunteered at a nonprofit for underprivileged youth 5 years ago. We'd stayed loosely in touch through occasional emails. Grace, I heard through the grapevine you're getting married, she said warmly. Congratulations. How's the planning going? I tried to sound upbeat. It's going well. We're keeping it simple. I heard, Elena said gently. I also heard you might be dealing with some family pressure. Maya must have reached out to her. They'd met once at a fundraiser and stayed connected on social media. I can't take money, I said immediately, knowing Elena's generous nature. I appreciate the thought, but… No money, Elena interrupted, laughing. I promise. But I do have a connection I think you'd appreciate. Someone who's passionate about meaningful weddings and proving that love doesn't require luxury. Would you be open to talking more about it? Something in her voice made me curious. What kind of connection? Let me make a call first. But Grace, trust me on this one. Elena called back the next morning. I was folding laundry in my tiny apartment when my phone buzzed. Okay, so don't freak out, she began, which immediately made me want to freak out. Remember how I mentioned someone passionate about authentic weddings? Yes, I said slowly, setting down a towel. It's Sophia Winters. I nearly dropped the phone. Sophia Winters was the celebrity Victoria worshipped. She'd been in a dozen romantic comedies, wrote best-selling books about relationships, and had millions of social media followers. Victoria quoted her constantly, had all her books, and never missed her talk show appearances. The Sophia Winters? I whispered. Elena, that's impossible. Why would she? She's passionate about stories like yours, Elena explained. Real people, real love, no pretension. She's actually doing a segment for her new show about meaningful weddings versus expensive productions. When I told her about your situation, she was immediately interested. This sounds like a dream, I said, laughing nervously. Things like this don't happen to people like me. They do when you deserve them, Elena replied firmly. Think about it, Grace. No pressure. But my mind was already racing with possibilities. 2 weeks before the wedding, Victoria made her move. She sent a group text to the entire family. Family dinner at my house, Saturday the 15th at 7 p.m. Everyone must attend. It's important. The 15th was our wedding day. Same time as our evening ceremony. Paul stared at his phone in disbelief. She can't be serious. She knows what day that is. Cassandra's response came through moments later. Can't wait, Mom. So glad we'll have a proper celebration that night. She's hosting a competing event, I said flatly. She can't stop us from getting married, so she's making sure half your family won't be there. Paul's face flushed with anger. I'll talk to her. Don't, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Let her have her dinner. The people who truly care about us will choose to be there. But inside, I was crumbling. Paul spent an hour on the phone with his mother, and I could hear her voice through the speaker, sharp, unyielding, victorious. When he hung up, he looked defeated. He'd failed to change her mind, and we both knew many family members would choose her dinner over our wedding. That night, Paul and I had our worst fight. He sat on the edge of our bed, head in his hands. Maybe we should postpone. Just a few months, until things calm down with my family. I stared at him from across the room. Your mother insults me repeatedly, mocks our wedding online, and now schedules a competing event. And you want to reward that behavior by postponing. It's not about rewarding her, Paul said defensively. My family's not completely wrong about appearances. A wedding reflects on both families and what? I interrupted, my voice rising. My family isn't good enough? My simple wedding embarrasses you. That's not what I meant, he backtracked quickly. Then what did you mean? I demanded. You'd rather have your mother's approval than marry me? Because that's what it sounds like. Paul opened his mouth to respond, but said nothing. The silence stretched between us, widening into a chasm I wasn't sure we could cross. I grabbed my keys and walked out, spending the night at Maya's apartment. I cried until my eyes swelled shut, wondering if I'd just lost the man I loved over something as stupid as wedding venue politics. I spent the next 2 days at my small studio apartment, the one I'd kept as a backup, unable to fully commit to moving into Paul's place. I hung my simple wedding dress on the closet door and stared at it for hours. The ivory lace was delicate, purchased from a small boutique for $300. It wasn't designer, but it was beautiful. It was me. Victoria's words echoed in my mind. Cheap. Budget. Thrift store. But when I looked at that dress, I saw something else. I saw honesty. I saw a woman who worked hard for everything she had and wasn't ashamed of it. Paul called 17 times. I answered none of them. I needed space to think clearly, to decide what I really wanted. By the third day, I'd reached a conclusion. I would marry him, but only on my terms. No more apologizing for who I was. No more making myself smaller to fit into his mother's world. If Paul truly loved me, he'd stand beside me regardless of what his family thought. And if he couldn't do that, better to know now than after signing a marriage certificate. I was making coffee the next morning when Elena called again. You might want to sit down, she said, her voice vibrating with excitement. I sat on my worn couch, cradling the phone. What's going on? Sophia Winters wants to officiate your wedding. She's doing a series for her new show about real love stories, the kind that don't need fancy venues or expensive rings. She wants yours to be the premiere episode. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, splashing brown liquid across the floor. She what? There's more, Elena continued. She wants to film it. Not reality TV style, tasteful, beautiful coverage that celebrates what you and Paul have built. A small crew, minimal interference. And Grace? It would air nationally. Millions of viewers. I couldn't breathe. Victoria's cheap wedding would be broadcast on national television, officiated by the very celebrity she idolized. The irony was almost too perfect. I need to talk to Paul, I said weakly. Of course. But Grace? Whatever his mother did, whatever she said, this is your chance to show the whole world what real love looks like. After hanging up, I stared at the coffee stains spreading across my floor. Then I started laughing, tears streaming down my face. Maybe sometimes the universe did balance the scales. I met Paul at our favorite coffee shop. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. Grace, I'm so sorry. I was wrong about everything. My mother's behavior is inexcusable, and I should have shut it down immediately. I know, I said simply. But Paul, I need you to understand something. This is who I am. I'll never be wealthy. I'll never fit perfectly into your mother's world. If you need someone different, I need you, he interrupted, grabbing my hands across the table. Just you, exactly as you are. I don't care what my mother thinks. I took a deep breath. Good, because something unexpected has happened. I explained Elena's call, watching his eyes grow wider with each detail. But I left out one crucial piece of information. I didn't tell him I'd already agreed. Sophia Winters, he breathed. My mother is obsessed with her. I know, I said, allowing myself a small smile, which is why I've decided to do it. But Paul, I need you to trust me completely.
Can you do that?
He nodded without hesitation. Whatever you need. Then don't tell your mother. Don't tell anyone. Let it be a surprise. His confusion was evident, but he agreed. That was enough for now. The day before our wedding, Victoria posted on Facebook. I saw it because Cassandra tagged Paul, ensuring we wouldn't miss it. Can't wait for tomorrow's low-budget love fest, Victoria had written, with a winking emoji. Hope it doesn't rain on the thrift bride. Meanwhile, our family will be celebrating properly. #RealClass, #FamilyFirst. The post had 63 likes and dozens of comments from their social circle. Most were supportive of Victoria, making thinly veiled jokes about our adorable attempt at a wedding. A few people I didn't recognize had commented with heart emojis on Victoria's dinner invitation. Paul saw the post and went pale. I'm calling her right now. Don't, I said calmly, setting his phone down. Let her have this moment. By this time tomorrow, everything will be different. Grace, what are you planning? Paul asked nervously. I just kissed his cheek. Trust me, remember? Now help me finish these centerpieces. We have a wedding tomorrow, and rain or shine, it's going to be perfect. That night, I barely slept. Excitement and terror fought for dominance in my chest. Everything was about to change, and there was no turning back now. Rain started pouring at 6 in the morning on our wedding day. I woke to the sound of it hammering against my window, steady and relentless. Maya called immediately, panic in her voice. Grace, the weather app says it won't stop until tonight. Should we? No, I said firmly. We're not changing anything. Let it rain. The garden venue had a covered pavilion where we could move the ceremony, but the rain would definitely make everything muddy and complicated. Guests would have to navigate puddles, and the romantic outdoor atmosphere would be replaced with umbrellas and wet grass. I could hear the whispers already as guests arrived. Of course this would happen to her, Cassandra said loudly to her cousin, making sure I overheard. Even the weather is against this wedding. Victoria arrived in a designer raincoat, looking smug. Perhaps this is a sign, she murmured to the handful of family members who'd chosen our wedding over her dinner. Nature itself is protesting. I kept smiling, my dress protected under a clear garment bag. Paul squeezed my hand, worry evident in his eyes. But I felt strangely calm. The rain wasn't a problem, it was atmosphere. And soon, very soon, Victoria's smugness would evaporate faster than puddles in sunshine. At exactly 2 o'clock, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the garden entrance. Security personnel emerged first, professional and efficient. The remaining guests turned to stare, confusion rippling through the small crowd. Even the rain seemed to soften, as if making way for something important. Victoria's mouth fell open. Who is that? She demanded, grabbing Cassandra's arm. I felt my heart pounding as I watched the SUV door open. This was it. The moment everything changed. Paul stood beside me, equally confused. I'd kept this secret even from him, wanting his reaction to be genuine. A figure emerged from the vehicle, elegant despite the rain. Security held a large umbrella over her as she walked toward our ceremony space. I watched Victoria's face transform from confusion to shock to utter disbelief. That's not, Cassandra stammered. Mom, is that? I smiled faintly, finally allowing myself to feel the satisfaction I'd been suppressing for weeks. "Yes," I said softly. "That's the officiant." Maya grabbed my arm, squealing. Paul turned to me with wide eyes, and I simply nodded. Let the show begin. Sophia Winters walked through the rain like she owned the weather itself. She was even more beautiful in person, with genuine warmth radiating from her smile. Gasps rippled through the crowd as recognition spread. Phones came out, cameras flashing despite the rain. Victoria's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide her shock. This was the woman whose books lined her shelves, whose quotes she shared constantly online, whose movies she'd seen a dozen times each. And she was walking straight toward me. "Grace," Sophia said warmly, pulling me into a hug. "I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for letting me celebrate your special day." The crowd heard every word. Sophia Winters, thanking me, honored to be at my cheap wedding. Cassandra's phone nearly slipped from her hands. Victoria stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish. Paul stared between Sophia and me, slowly piecing together what I'd orchestrated. "You must be Paul," Sophia said, shaking his hand. "Grace has told me so much about you, and about your beautiful vision for today, choosing meaning over extravagance. That takes real courage in today's world." She said it loudly enough for everyone to hear, her words a direct contradiction to everything Victoria had said about our wedding. The power shift was instant and absolute. Paul pulled me aside as Sophia greeted other guests. "Wait, you knew her? This whole time?" His voice mixed amazement with slight hurt that I'd kept such a secret. "We volunteered together years ago at Elena's nonprofit," I explained quietly. "She remembered me. And when Elena told her our story, she wanted to be part of it. She believes in simple weddings, Paul. She thinks they're more honest than $100,000 productions." "This is incredible," Paul breathed, watching Sophia chat with my grandmother. "But why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed your reaction to be real," I admitted. "And because I wasn't sure until yesterday that it would actually happen. I didn't want to get our hopes up." Paul looked at his mother, who was frantically whispering with Cassandra. "She's going to lose her mind." "She already is," I said, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. "And Paul?" Sophia brought cameras. "This is being filmed for her new show about authentic love stories." His jaw dropped. "You're kidding." "I'm really not." For the first time in weeks, Paul laughed, a real, genuine, joyful laugh. "My mother's worst nightmare is coming true. Her cheap wedding is going to be on national television." The production crew moved efficiently, setting up discreet cameras around the garden. They blended into the background, professional and unobtrusive. Sophia explained to the gathered guests what was happening. "I'm producing a series about authentic love," she announced, her voice carrying across the pavilion. "Stories about couples who choose substance over show, meaning over money. Grace and Paul's wedding represents everything beautiful about that choice. Thank you all for being part of this celebration, and for letting us share it with the world." The crowd erupted in applause. Even the guests who'd been skeptical earlier were now thrilled to be part of something special. Victoria's face had gone from red to pale to a sickly green color. Her proper dinner party suddenly seemed petty and small. Cassandra tried to inch closer to the cameras, but Sophia's team gently guided guests to their seats. This wasn't about social climbing or publicity stunts. This was about celebrating something real. As I took my place under the flower-draped arch, rain still falling softly around us, I caught Victoria's eye. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. All her cruelty and judgment had backfired spectacularly. But I didn't feel triumphant, just peaceful. I'd stopped trying to earn her approval and found something better instead. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Sophia spoke about love with such eloquence that several guests cried, including my mother. "In a world obsessed with appearances," Sophia said, looking directly at the camera, "we forget that the strongest relationships are built on character, not credit cards. Money can buy elaborate venues and expensive flowers, but it can't buy what Grace and Paul have, a foundation of mutual respect, genuine partnership, and unwavering commitment to each other's happiness." The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. I saw Victoria flinch slightly, her earlier smugness completely evaporated. Beside her, Paul's aunt dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Even the guests who'd chosen Victoria's dinner originally looked uncomfortable, realizing they'd backed the wrong horse. Paul's vows made me cry. "I promise to choose you over comfort," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "To defend you when you need defending, to stand beside you even when it's difficult, and to never let anyone make you feel less than the extraordinary woman you are." He squeezed my hands, and I knew he was apologizing for every time he'd stayed silent. When I said my vows, I spoke directly to him, ignoring the cameras and guests. "I promise to love you exactly as you are, to build a life that honors both of us, and to never compromise my truth for someone else's approval." After the ceremony, as guests mingled and admired the simple beauty of our rain-soaked reception, Victoria approached me quietly. She looked older somehow, her confidence stripped away. "Grace, can we talk?" I nodded, following her to a quieter corner of the garden. Paul started to join us, but I shook my head gently. This conversation needed to happen without him. "This was beautiful," Victoria said finally, the words seeming to pain her. "I didn't understand what you were trying to create here." "You didn't want to understand," I corrected gently. "You decided who I was based on my bank account, and you never gave me a chance to show you anything different." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was protecting Paul. I thought—" She stopped, struggling with the words. "My own mother-in-law treated me terribly when I married Paul's father. I swore I wouldn't be like her, but I became exactly what I hated." The confession surprised me. "Then why?" I asked. "Fear," Victoria admitted. "Fear that my son would struggle like we did early on. Fear that you'd blame him for not having more. Fear that I'd lose him to someone I didn't understand." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was honest. I saw genuine remorse in her face, mixed with embarrassment and shame. "What happens now?" Victoria asked quietly. "That's up to you," I replied. "I didn't do this for revenge, Victoria. I did it because I refuse to be ashamed of who I am." Sophia's involvement was unexpected, but it doesn't change why Paul and I chose this kind of wedding.
Victoria nodded slowly.
"I understand. And for what it's worth, I am sorry. Truly sorry." I took a deep breath. "Then prove it. Not with words, but with actions. Treat me like family instead of competition. Support your son's choices even when they differ from yours. And stop measuring people's worth by their bank statements." "I will," Victoria promised. "And Grace, thank you for not shutting me out completely. I wouldn't have blamed you." As she walked away, Cassandra approached tentatively. Her earlier smugness had been replaced with something closer to shame. "I was horrible to you," she said bluntly.
"I'm sorry."
Maya appeared at my elbow, watching the Winter's women retreat. "Did that just happen? Did your monster-in-law actually apologize?" "Something like that," I murmured. Within hours, messages flooded my phone. Strangers who'd seen social media posts from guests, people inspired by Sophia's presence, and friends congratulating us. But I ignored most of it. The win wasn't the attention or validation. It was the peace settling into my chest. I'd stood my ground, and everything had fallen into place. That night, Paul and I stood alone in our new apartment, our real home together now. He'd been quiet since the reception ended, processing everything. Finally, he spoke. "I almost let them ruin us. My mother, the family pressure, all of it. I almost chose their approval over you." I took his hands. "But you didn't. In the end, you stood beside me." "Barely," Paul said, his voice thick with regret. "I should have defended you from the beginning. Every insult, every cruel comment, I should have shut it down immediately. Instead, I stayed silent and let you hurt. Then don't ever let them hurt me again," I said firmly. "That's the promise I need from you, Paul. Not perfection, but protection."
"Can you do that?"
He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I promise. No more silence. No more choosing peace over defending what's right. You deserved better from me, and I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving I can be better. We held each other in the darkness, rain still pattering against the windows. The wedding was over, but our real marriage was just beginning. And this time, we both understood what was required: honesty, courage, and an absolute refusal to let anyone diminish what we'd built together. Outside, the storm was finally clearing. Tomorrow would bring sunshine and new beginnings. 3 months later, Victoria hosted a family dinner, this time genuinely in our honor. The invitation was humble, handwritten, and addressed to both of us equally. When we arrived, she'd prepared a simple meal herself rather than hiring caterers, her way of showing she'd listened. To the woman who taught me that class isn't bought, it's shown through character, Victoria toasted, raising her glass. The gathered family members echoed the sentiment, glasses clinking around the table. Paul's aunt, who'd skipped our wedding for Victoria's dinner, looked especially apologetic. Cassandra had brought her new boyfriend, a teacher like Paul who clearly made her happy despite his modest income. "You inspired me," she admitted quietly. "I broke up with Bradley, you remember him, the investment banker who treated waiters like servants? I decided I wanted someone real instead of someone rich." I saw genuine change in both women. It wasn't perfect, and old habits occasionally resurfaced, but they were trying. Victoria asked about my work, actually listening to my answers. Cassandra shared memes with me, silly inside jokes that built a tentative friendship. I forgave them, though I never forgot. Some wounds leave scars, permanent reminders of lessons learned. But I chose to move forward, giving them the chance Victoria had denied me initially. Paul watched these interactions with cautious hope, his hand finding mine under the table. 6 months after our wedding, I sat curled on our couch watching television. Paul was grading papers beside me, occasionally chuckling at his students' creative answers. A comfortable silence filled our small living room. Then Sophia Winters's show came on. I hadn't watched since it aired initially, too overwhelmed by the attention. But tonight felt right. Paul set his papers aside, pulling me closer as the episode began. There we were on screen. Younger versions of ourselves, standing in the rain, barefoot on muddy grass, laughing as we exchanged vows. The cameras had captured everything: the simple beauty of wildflowers, the genuine emotion on guests' faces, and the transformative power of choosing substance over show. Sophia's voiceover narrated our story. "This was the wedding that reminded us what love looks like," she said as the camera panned across our faces. "Not expensive, not extravagant, but absolutely priceless." Grace and Paul taught us that the value of a marriage isn't measured in dollars spent, but in promises kept. The screen showed Victoria's face softening during the ceremony, the exact moment shame replaced smugness. Then it cut to Paul and me, dancing in the rain, completely absorbed in each other while the world watched. I smiled, leaning into Paul's warmth. "Cheap," I whispered, echoing Victoria's old insult. Paul kissed my forehead.
No.
It was priceless. The episode ended with Sophia's final words: "Real love doesn't need a stadium or a spotlight. It just needs 2 people brave enough to choose each other, again and again, no matter what." If this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage, love, and sweet justice. Because everyone deserves to see that real class can never be purchased, only earned through character. Thank you for being part of this journey.